So there weren't any products that you could buy, but women are creative and we're problem solvers. And so there was a lot of posts on Pinterest and people sharing ways that they had done DIY solutions. So they had taken shoe organizers, they had bought plastic containers off of Amazon and kind of repurposed them for medications. Clearly we needed this. Just no one had kind of taken all these ideas and made it easy for you to find this specific for your journey.
Been There, Injected That is a TMI podcast about going through infertility and all the hormone injections, awkward moments, and nervous breakdowns along the way. I'm Elyse Ash. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Been There, Injected That. Today on the podcast, we have Danielle and Patrick Hall, who I'm so excited to talk to today. Danielle and Patrick Hall are fertility warriors themselves and married co-founders of the company MyVitro. MyVitro creates medical organizers designed specifically for people undergoing IVF and other fertility treatments. So welcome, Danielle and Patrick. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you both. Danielle and I have chatted a little bit over email, but Patrick, I'm excited to meet you and kind of talk to you both as a couple. This is our first interview we've done with a married couple who's gone through infertility. And I'm excited to hear from both of you. I think too often I'm talking just to like one representative of a couple, and usually it's a woman or a female partner. So I'm excited to kind of hear from both of you about your experience through fertility treatments and all that good stuff. So thank you both for being so open to this.
Oh, you bet. And, you know, the statistics are that it's a third, right? A third of the issues in infertility are unknown. A third come from issues with the female cycle, and a third come from the male perspective. So I'm glad to be able to talk about those issues.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm wondering if we can start at the beginning with both of you, how you met and kind of what your relationship looked like before trying to conceive.
So we met at a work conference and we did long distance for, I guess, maybe almost 2 years. We met, Patrick lived in Ohio, which is where we currently live now, but I'm from New England. And so I was in Boston and he was in Ohio, and we went back and forth to see each other. And then when we got married, I moved here to Ohio. So now we're in Columbus. And I think we did what a fair amount of couples do who are maybe a little bit older. We got married. I was in my early 30s. So as soon as we got married, we started to try to have kids.
Yeah, and I was in my late 30s, but I had a child with my ex-wife, and we had gotten pregnant immediately. So this is when I was 31. So that kind of informed the process of us trying to conceive. Was, I had successfully had a child. Yeah.
So it really didn't occur to us that we would struggle. I think back to us and I feel like we were so naive, just like those, we're going to have sex and we're going to have a baby and we're going to just move forward and it's going to be easy and quick and no problem.
Well, and there's no reason to assume there's a problem until there is one. So, and right. Especially Patrick, with your history as well, it's like, why would there be an issue?
So we started right away. And really that first year we got pregnant and miscarried 3 times that first year that we started trying, which was really hard. I think a lot of us have experienced this, and the first miscarriage was just like a total shock. Again, I think I don't think either of us had in our mind that we were going to have any trouble. So it was a big shock. And then I think with each subsequent pregnancy and then miscarriage, there was just so much fear surrounding it. And we didn't know. We didn't have any answers. And I think for me, that part was really hard, just the not knowing, not having any insight into what was happening. And miscarriages are very common. And so our OB that we had started seeing through this process had said, this is not uncommon, just try again. And so we didn't have a lot of testing. And by the time we did go see a fertility specialist after our 3rd miscarriage, we really had to advocate strongly for ourselves in order to get that recommendation. I think if we hadn't pushed, I think we wouldn't have been recommended at that point.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a tough position to be in, where you've had 3 losses is so intense. I mean, and it's intense on your body, of course, but it's also so tough on your relationship, on your own mental health, and really trying to decide like what is the best path for us, because you don't want to keep trying and having losses. Like you want answers.
Yeah. And I think for us too, really the difficulty was that, Danielle blaming herself and constantly questioning what's wrong with me, what are my issues. And it really wasn't until we had some certainty around a diagnosis that I think we felt like we had a plan at least.
What was your path to receiving a diagnosis, and what was your plan?
Yeah, sure. So, kind of immediately when seeing an REI, we went down the path of genetic testing, and I received a diagnosis of a balanced translocation. It took a while to get those results, but really at the end of the day, the genetic abnormality was causing a miscarriage. I think it was roughly 73% of the time. So,
wow.
Right. So understanding probabilities and odds, it was just kind of a roll of the dice each time on whether or not a pregnancy would be
viable.
Yeah, viable.
Yeah. And I think that was really, again, surprising to us. As Patrick said, I obviously was leaning very hard into this idea that it was absolutely my fault. I think partially just because so often in kind of our culture and society, women do think it's our fault. Again, for no reason other than just we take on that burden ourselves. But then the other is that Patrick had already had a child. So we had this extra data point. So when we got that diagnosis, it was very surprising. But I think for me, it gave me more peace. Just even though it wasn't a great diagnosis, 73% of the time we were going to miscarry, that was not a good diagnosis, but it was information. And I think a lot of times with infertility, you don't always get that kind of clear insight on what's happening. And so I think at least that part, we at least knew what our challenge was, even if it was a big challenge.
So how did this diagnosis affect your relationship? What were kind of some of the interpersonal things you were both dealing with and trying to get through together?
For me, it kind of floored me, the diagnosis, right? Like, I guess I could feel pretty open in saying that it definitely challenged my masculinity, right? Like, it's just not something that I had ever identified myself as being, is infertile, right? But like a clear diagnosis and a clear, medical condition is also psychologically impactful, right? So kind of the tables turned on, I think, how I felt about what we were going through pretty immediately. I was just kind of like crushed that I knew how much emotional pain Danielle had gone through. And for my body to kind of be the cause of that was just very psychologically jarring. But I definitely think that it opened us up in a path of communicating around kind of more negative emotions and challenges and talking through those together as a couple. We had just recently met, we had just recently gotten married. So all of the energy that we had had together had been very positive and very, very dynamic for building a future together. And these challenges kind of shifted a lot of the emotional dynamics. But I definitely think it made us stronger as a couple going through it.
I absolutely agree. And I think being respectful, I think this was the first time that we realized that we both process negative emotions in different ways, and not being upset with the other when they didn't react the way that we did.
That is like such a huge theme that we hear all the time, where one person in the couple is maybe responding to trauma or information in one way. Maybe they're being avoidant. Maybe they're playing a lot of video games. Maybe they're drinking a lot, like whatever that looks like. And the other partner is like, am I the only one who's sad?
Yeah.
Like, I feel really alone. And I feel like that's a common dynamic in heterosexual couples, where you have this like masculine figure who's like looking to be the fixer and doesn't want to get emotional and just really wants to support their partner. And then you have oftentimes like the woman being like, why am I the only one who's sad about this? Can you like get on my level? That was a constant fight Brad and I had, where it was just me feeling like, why am I the only one sad? And he's like, I'm sad. I'm just handling this like way differently than you are.
I feel like that is exactly us. I feel like I would say, why are you not at an 11? Like I'm at an 11 right now.
Yeah, we are in crisis mode. Like,
Yeah.
get on my level. I felt like that was a constant. I was personally offended by how non-emotional he was. I was like, what has to happen? Like, this is a tragedy, and you're just being, are you dead inside? Like, what's happening?
Right. And it's funny. It's funny the examples you push out of like how men handle this, right? Like, fortunately, I'd kind of started down the path of some pretty like intense physical exercise. I'd gotten in pretty intensely into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And while this was going on, like those training sessions just amped up like tremendously. I'd signed up for competitions. I was training 4 times a week. And so I was able to, honestly, I was in the best shape of my life going through this, because this is where all of those negative emotions went out. Was unfortunate. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, just wrestling other men, right? Like just taking that energy out in a physical way, and it definitely helped me psychologically, because it just kind of wrung all that out of me.
Well, and it's funny because I think we as humans and through this pandemic, we've just seen like how different all of our coping mechanisms are. And I mean, that seems like a really healthy way of dealing with stress and aggression, is like through that physical way. I feel like I was just eating a lot of ice cream. So getting back, so you received this diagnosis, and then did you decide to go through IVF? Like, what did that process look like, and what surprised you about that process?
Yeah. So our doctor immediately said that IVF was our best option. We knew that we would do ICSI because of, I think primarily because of our ages, and that the assumption would be that we would do genetic testing of the embryos. So we would always be doing a frozen transfer. I guess there was a few months in between our diagnosis and starting treatment, but we knew right away that, yep, this is what we're going to do. So we went right into it. I don't really think we even considered not doing it. I think it was like the message to us, and we always talked about it in these terms, is we needed more chances with such a high risk of non-viable embryos. We needed just lots of at-bats. So more eggs, more fertilized embryos give us a higher chance of having an embryo that we'd be able to transfer. So we went into this, I think in true kind of competitive, high functioning, like we're going to attack this. We're going to do IVF. We're going to get tons of eggs. We're going to get tons of embryos. And of course, the way that this so often goes, it did not turn out that way. I didn't respond very well to IVF, particularly the first round that we did. So we didn't end up with many eggs. And that first round, even after the retrieval, we didn't have any embryos rather that came to blastocyst. So we could never do any genetic testing that first round. I think we had all these hopes that IVF was going to be the solution. Okay, we've diagnosed our problem. IVF is the solution. We will do IVF, and then we will move forward and we will get pregnant. And we ended up with nothing to show for it after that first round.
What were some of the feelings that were kind of popping up over receiving that news?
I think I fell right back into my pattern that I had been in before we got our diagnosis of my body's not good at IVF. My body's not responding to this, even though maybe our infertility diagnosis wasn't kind of my fault. Now I'm not good at IVF. So, okay, we're back in my sweet spot of blaming myself and blaming my body. So I feel like I felt very like, this isn't going to work.
That is so crazy what you said, Danielle, with the like, I'm not good at IVF. Like, as somebody else who had a failed first round where we also didn't have any viable embryos, I also felt that like, wow, like not only am I bad at getting pregnant, I'm really bad at like making eggs, and I'm bad at this. Like, even this thing that we're paying a ton of money for help, we're injecting me full of these hormones. Like, despite all this help, like I still suck at this, which is,
yeah.
I mean, it's just insane that that's how we talk to ourselves, because if we were talking to a friend who were going through this, we'd never be like, wow, you're really bad at IVF. It's just that negative self-talk is so internal and it's so deep.
Patrick, I'm trying to remember back, what was your reaction after our first round?
I guess just shocked at the results, right? I mean, the odds of that outcome just didn't seem possible, on top of I was already causing miscarriages so frequently, right? Like it just like the numbers constantly being against us. And I'm entrepreneur, I'm an investor. So like I understand probabilities and numbers pretty well, I like to think. And just the way the numbers kept coming up were just kind of staggering to me.
Mm-hmm.
Were you both aligned at what you want to do next or next steps, or did that take a little time to process and agree on a path?
I think we both knew that we wanted to do another round. I think the big question was, were we going to stay at our clinic? And we went in for our appointment after the cycle had failed to talk with our doctor and say, okay, like, let's rehash this. What are we going to do next round? Like, we're ready to try again. How are we going to improve this? And I remember so clearly that our doctor said, we're not going to change anything. Sometimes this happens. We're going to just do this exact cycle again. And I just remember my thought was just like, absolutely not. Like, nope, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think that we need to think about going to another doctor.
Right. And I just think there was just not a good match personality wise there for us either. It just wasn't a good fit. And I don't think either of us had really ever considered that. Like we never had intense medical treatments before, never really thought about like the environment and the type of care you're getting. We always kind of thought everything was like very clear cut, very procedure oriented. And I don't think either of us had ever really kind of had to confront that piece of the medical industry either, of really evaluating like our conditions and our environment and who we're seeing for treatment. So I think that was eye-opening for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you switched clinics, and were you happier at your next clinic?
Yeah, absolutely. We met with him and we're in Columbus, Ohio, and he's a little bit polarizing, I think, in the IVF community here in Columbus, because he's very direct. I remember our first meeting with him, he talked to us about sperm donation, egg donation. There was nothing he held back. He was like, your chances are low of getting pregnant, but with your own eggs and your own sperm. So what do you think about these things? I don't know, Patrick, you can chime in, but I remember just being like, wow, that came up very fast. Like, we've only done one round. I don't think we're ready for that. But I think for me, I very much appreciated his very straightforward, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. And I really liked that about his direct manner.
Yeah, I would concur. He put everything out on the table in a much clearer, direct way. It seemed very much more open, and we were kind of more engaged in the process and immediately in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And he changed our protocol. Some of it was just small tweaks, some of it was different medication, and we did have better results. We got the same amount of eggs retrieved that round, but we ended up with 5 embryos that we got tested. So,
wow.
So much better. Yeah. And
yeah, going from 0 to 5, I mean, that's huge.
And I think now that years later, and now that I've spent so much time within kind of the infertility community and hearing from other people and their stories, now I realize just how rare that is to go from no embryos to test one round to having 5 to test the second round. But even with 5 to test, we still, after the testing, ended up with no viable embryos.
Wow.
Which was really hard.
How did you decide to move forward after that?
The way I felt about it was IVF, the experience of doing IVF, the work of my body, the scheduling, the mental load was much harder than the experience of having a miscarriage. And I think there's like a lot of different things that go into that, but it was very clear to me that I wanted to try maybe the natural way. And even though we didn't have a lot of hope, IVF wasn't really giving us a lot of hope either. And so I still felt like having a baby was probably not going to be possible for us, but I didn't want to keep using IVF as a tool to get there.
But I think that's where us having a clear diagnosis was very helpful, right? Like, I said that earlier, it's a third. And, it wasn't unknown to us, right? We knew exactly what the problem was. So I think that we're very fortunate from that perspective.
And Danielle had gotten pregnant before multiple times. So it wasn't like, okay, and Patrick, you'd had a child from a previous marriage. So those were knowns too. So yeah, I can see how you would come to this decision. So did you decide then to keep trying naturally?
Yeah, we did. I think, MyVitro, I think this is really where MyVitro enters the chat very strongly. So I had the idea for MyVitro during that second round. And in my mind, that was a very big part of this decision-making process. I felt very motivated. I felt very driven to spend time and energy on this new idea that we had. And so that was another component. I think the feeling of helplessness that we maybe weren't going to grow our family anymore was tempered by this new idea that was really taking a lot of energy and excitement from us. So I feel like that was kind of both of those things were happening when we decided to stop treatment.
We'll be right back. Whether you're looking for a good luck charm for your next IUI or getting a little something for your cycle buddy on Instagram, check out our online shop. Discreet hopeful beanies, rainbow sweatshirts, we've got you covered whether you're loud and proud about your journey or keeping it under wraps for now. Check out shop.fruitfulfertility.org to see all our Fruitful merchandise. Now back to the show. Can you share a little bit more, Danielle, about where that idea came from MyVitro and kind of walk us through some of the beginning fun ideations that you were having at the very, very beginning?
So during the second round, one of the things that we did, the change that we made was we decided that Patrick should take Josie, his daughter, my stepdaughter, on a father-daughter trip and be away during my round of treatment. I decided that the best solution was to not have a support system at all. Genius move on my part.
I would like to be incredibly isolated during
yes,
that time.
I would like completely. And I think my thought process was just, I want to be very selfish. I still had to do my job. Obviously, we're all great. Everybody's working through all of this, which is just shocking because it takes so much time. So
and the compartmentalization you have to do when you're working and going through IVF is borderline
like
insane.
Crazy. Yeah, exactly.
Everything's fine. Here's that expense report. Yeah.
Yep. Hold on. I'll be right back. I had to just go give myself a couple shots real fast. But don't tell anyone that.
Yeah. Don't mind my runny eyeliner. It's fine.
It's fine. So I thought I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do IVF and I'm going to do yoga and I'm not going to think about anything else. So Patrick and Josie went on an international trip. So not only were they going to be away, but they were going to be on a different time zone and maybe out of self-service, like perfect. So off they go. And like halfway through my stims, I obviously have a full-on mental breakdown. And I'm trying to talk to Patrick and he's in Iceland with Josie. And that's when I had the idea. And I think this was me trying to grasp at different ways to find support. So I had convinced myself that I didn't need emotional support, which wasn't true, but I was also looking for what are other ways to support. And so I was really struggling with the medication. My first round, I had made a couple of mistakes. And so I had made improvements my second round. I set up a workstation. I didn't move around my house. I was very methodical with how I organized everything, on a hamper in our bedroom. And at that kind of midway point, when I was really starting to freak out about not having any support around, I said, you know what? I'm just going to buy something to organize my medication. I'm just going to go online and I'm going to look for an IVF medication organizer and I'm going to buy it. I'm going to have Amazon send it to me in 2 days. And that will help at least this part of it. And obviously I looked and there's nothing that exists. And I got really mad that I couldn't find a solution for this problem. That seemed very straightforward and probably very easy. We have all sorts of tools for organizing everything else in our life.
Yeah, there's 800 different ways you can organize your shoes. There's not one for organizing meds. It's so weird.
Right. Exactly. And for the cost that all the money that we all spend on these medications, on IVF all the time, the importance of it. So that night I drew a sketch, which, when I look at the sketch now of my first idea of what it would look like, it doesn't really look like any of our products. It has some components of it, but we worked with design firms over the years that had much more skill in this area. So they helped us convert our vision into the products that we have now. But that was when I did it. I sketched it out. And I also realized in searching, there weren't any products that you could buy, but women are creative and we're problem solvers. And so there was a lot of posts on Pinterest and people sharing ways that they had done DIY solutions. So they had taken shoe organizers, they had taken jewelry organizers, they had bought plastic containers off of Amazon and kind of repurposed them for medications. So clearly we needed this. We were coming up with ideas, but just no one had kind of taken all these ideas and made it easy for you to find this specific for your journey.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of those photos too, Danielle, like on social media of people kind of hacking tackle boxes and caboodles and like those kinds of things and kind of making it fit. But because the medication for IVF is so specific and some of them are like in pens and some meds you need to mix and there's different like size needles and some needs to be refrigerated. It can be like really hard to figure out. And I think what you're hitting on also here with your idea is this idea of like organization almost as, for some people, a form of self-care. Like I was definitely that way when I was going through IVF because I also like structure and organization and control. And so for me, I was also like hungry for that and hungry for some type of way to treat myself through this too. And I feel like this would absolutely have been a type of product I would have been like, well, we're going through this really expensive, intense procedure. I at least want it to like look cute and be organized and like have all the different components and like have an element of self-care. This is something I can treat myself to and feel excited about.
Yeah. And I think all those things you just laid out, right? Like Danielle came to me with this idea, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a little apprehensive on kind of pitching it to me. Like we had talked, really honestly, we had talked several times about different types of businesses that we could run together, franchises, day spas, things like that. And when Danielle sent me that I have an idea here, everything you just said, Elyse, clicked with me. Like, yes, anytime you have like a psychologically and emotionally intensive process, there's space to add value to improve it. And it all immediately clicked that there's a hole here that we could fill.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was apprehensive. I think we knew that just within our relationship that the idea of starting a business we didn't know what kind of business was important to us. And up until this moment, I had brought several ideas and they had all been generally shut down relatively quickly for various reasons. So I was a little bit hesitant. And Patrick immediately was like, no, there's something here.
Well, and nothing like pitching like a very personal idea when you're on a lot of hormones and feeling very vulnerable. You're like, please, do you like this idea?
Right. And I think that's really what my question was. Like, am I going crazy? Like, am I just so upset and I'm just grasping to try to find things to make this more palatable, to make, to feel more organized, to feel more in control? Like, am I just grasping for that? Or is this something is there a gap here? And will other people want this? And we just like right away, we both, I think we're like, let's try this.
What are some of your favorite parts of working on MyVitro? And especially as a couple, where my husband and I, we had a similar situation where we were so traumatized through our fertility journey. And we're like, this sucks and could only get better. So like, let's use our talents and skills and put our brains together and come up with something. That's how we came up with Fruitful. But I'm curious with you, Patrick and Danielle, like what are some of your favorite parts about working on this product?
Yeah, well, I think for me, like I've kind of taken on logistics and just I touch all of our orders every day, right? So every day I package up half a dozen, 2 dozen packages that are going to help somebody have a baby. And I didn't really think about how positive and energizing that would make me feel when we started talking about this business. But so much of our world is very abstract. I spent a lot of time in spreadsheets in my career, right, and just kind of moving columns around and dealing with things in a very abstract way. So I think that has been very gratifying for me. It's just being able to, touch everything as it goes out the door.
And we get such wonderful feedback. I think I cry once a day just from a message someone sends to us, either a review on our website or on Instagram. And sometimes they're about the practical side of it. This helped me be more organized. I feel in control. But a lot of times they say, thank you for being in business. Thank you for existing. This makes me feel seen. And I think those are the messages that make us feel amazing and the best. And I think when we started the business, part of the reason we wanted to start it is because there's something very normalizing about searching for a specialty product online and finding it right away and saying, okay, what I'm going through is not weird. I'm not alone. Here are these products just for what I'm going through. There's all these other people that are using them as well. We're all having a similar experience. There's something just so normalizing and about that process. And we hear that from our customers, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. I mean, especially when you're talking about people who have chronic illness or something else. I mean, just seeing the validation of like, I think a lot about people who have diabetes and, you know, a lot of inventions around like, okay, I need like a type of tape to stick my device to my body that isn't going to like hurt my skin. Oh, wow. Somebody invented that because they also saw this problem and also wanted to help invest in solving it, help people in the community. Like it's so multifaceted. And I think about that too with your products and how design is love. And it's seeing this problem, it's seeing this community, and it's saying, yes, this is worth the investment of designing this, selling it, putting up a website. I mean, it just takes so much money and time and investment to create a physical product, go through all this testing, go through all these iterations. I mean, I can only imagine how many different versions you all have designed. And I think as a consumer, you know that, and you know, like, wow, it must be worth it. There must be people who are benefiting from this for them to be in business and continue making these products.
It's so true. And to feel like I'm worth it, you know, going through this experience is that it's worth putting the time and the money into it. And I hope that people do feel that way. And I think also that, and I think this comes, I hope it comes across kind of in our branding and in our approach, is that there's nothing wrong with doing fertility treatment. There's nothing, you shouldn't feel ashamed. You shouldn't hide it. It's a medical procedure. It's a diagnosis. And here are the tools that you can use to help you with that. Really kind of taking away some of that stigma that I think so many of us feel alongside this.
Why is infertility particularly painful for people like you, Danielle, for people like me who like love control and organization? Have you found that this is particularly tricky for people who are like us and might be more type A?
When we were talking about what was the hardest part of this, I think when I think about that, I think the not knowing, not having those answers, which I think translates into not having control. So I think for so much of infertility, you either don't have a diagnosis ever, or you do, but there's a certain amount of time where you don't. You can't control the outcomes, even though we tried our best. And then I think particularly around treatment, when I think of our first round, I had no idea what I didn't know. I am someone who absolutely likes to study or prepare or learn in advance. And I didn't even know what I should be doing to go into my first round. And I think we relied on our clinic a lot. And we assumed that our clinic was telling us everything that we would ever need to know about doing IVF. And so much of IVF happens at home that even though we did get an injection training class and, you know, our doctor and our nurses did talk to us about it, the gap between what they tell you and feeling like you are good at or understand or feel confident is enormous. And so I think I really struggled with that there wasn't like a playbook of here are all the things that you will need to do in order to be successful at this. And I really struggled with that concept. And at the time, I was trying to think of what the word is. I guess I was in like message groups. I did not find the Instagram infertility community until long after we had stopped treatment. So I didn't really have a lot of support. My friends that had gone through it, I didn't talk to them in very much detail about this. Again, talk about cultural stigma and social stigma. These are some of my closest friends, and I didn't really open up or ask them questions about it. I didn't want to seem like I didn't know what I was doing. And so I think that I really struggled with that. And I think that pain point also fed into MyVitro. Not only are you going to organize your medications with our products, but we're hoping that you'll find us before your first round starts, and you'll quickly see all of the tools that will help you. You may not know that having an ice pack or a heating pad is helpful. You may not know that you're going to have to put half your medications in the refrigerator until they show up on your doorstep. And so we're hopeful that by looking at the products that we sell, you will understand more about what this experience is going to be like at home and help you be more successful and feel more confident through that process.
Do you have any tips or suggestions for ways people can stay organized while they're going through IVF?
I think the time commitment, the amount of time that IVF takes up in your life, I had no concept of going into this. So I think making sure that you really clear your calendar. And if you can, talk to your job. Neither of us spoke to our colleagues or or my boss at the time about it. And I think that added an extra layer of stress, because not only was I having to rework my schedule, but I was also kind of lying about it, which just adds like a whole nother layer of stress and anxiety. So I think if you can get some time off or at least time allotted for it, I think that's extremely helpful. Setting up a workstation. And this was something I did not do my first round. I did shots in the kitchen. I did them in my bedroom. I did them sometimes in front of the TV. This second round, I did not do that. Second round, I had a workstation. I treated it, I guess, with more seriousness. I don't like to think that I did not take it seriously the first time, but I didn't understand that I needed to be very organized and systematic in giving myself injections. And so I think having a designated workstation, it was a tip that I think is very helpful.
Yeah, I love that idea of having a designated workstation and also like a little bit of a ritual. I feel like after I would get an injection, I would like have a piece of Dove chocolate, or like there was like something I was like, no, I need to have like my little something happy to look forward to at the end of this. It's funny that you say you think you got more serious about it with your second round, because I feel like I had the opposite. I had the inverse where my first round, I was very methodical and I was very particular. And I almost was like doing self-care as a checklist. Okay, did I meditate? And it was very superstitious too. I'm a very superstitious person, like with sports and with everything. It's like, okay, who was pitching that day and what was I wearing? And like now I have to like replicate the same thing for success. So I feel like my first round, I was very like, meditate every day, do this every day, journal every day, which is so not the way self-care is supposed to work. Like I was so regimented. And then when that didn't work and our first cycle failed, I was kind of like, well, fuck this. This didn't work at all. I'm just going to do nothing. And I feel like I almost like threw everything in the trash and was like, well, all my ritualizations and like special woo-woo things I was doing, like none of that worked. So I'm just going to do nothing and reverse jinx it. So
right. Oh, so funny, right? We all have these it's all different tools to try to manage this almost unmanageable process.
So going back 1 second to your personal story, Patrick and Danielle, I'm curious to know what ended up happening. I know you decided to stop doing the IVF treatments and we're trying naturally. Can you kind of share where you ended up?
So kind of, I think surprisingly to us both, immediately after stopping IVF and trying to conceive naturally, Danielle became pregnant. We were pretty apprehensive. Farther along, we did, certainly did genetic testing, and, the embryo was viable, and we had a child 9 months later, a little boy named Elyse.
How did that feel, Danielle, after so many losses and failed IVF rounds? What was kind of going through your mind during that pregnancy?
Yeah, right. There was so much anxiety. And I think we did tell our parents pretty early on. I think we had learned through going through so many miscarriages that not talking about it didn't really serve us in any way, because you're kind of keeping the secret from the people that you will eventually want support from. So we told our parents pretty early on. And I remember Patrick's parents in particular were showing signs of excitement through the course. We were at dinner with them and we told them, and I just remember both of us being like, do not be excited. Like, we do not know how this is going to, and I just remember having a lot of anger about it. Like, please don't show excitement. We don't know if this is going to end up being a baby. Like, this is probably going to end in miscarriage. And I feel like we were plagued by those kinds of feelings really until probably halfway through, maybe. I'm trying to remember when we started to feel a little bit lighter, Patrick, and more.
I think for me, it was around 5 months. It was just like appointment after appointment and reassurance after reassurance, and seeing the genetic testing. And I think once we got to about the 5-month mark, we both were breathing a little easier.
Yeah.
Such an amazing story and journey. And I'm so inspired by both of you and how you've been able to turn something so painful and hard into something that's helping a lot of people, into something tangible that's giving people hope and organization, something both practical, but also that feels like self-care, I think is so important and interesting. And I'm just, so thrilled with the work that you've been doing for the community. So thank you both so much for being guests today. If you want to learn more about MyVitro, you can visit myvitro.com. They're on Instagram, Facebook, all the social media. So thank you both so much for sharing your story and for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on, Elyse. This has been lovely.
Yeah, and thank you for all the work you're doing for the community as well.
Well, maybe we can all put our traumatized heads together and make this less terrible. Been There, Injected That is produced by Fruitful Fertility and hosted by myself, Elyse Ash. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a rating and review, subscribe to get updates, and visit our website at fruitfulfertility.org. Thanks for listening.